If it's good enough for God, it's good enough for Wonderhussy. Hello, Wonderhussy here on a very chilly January day in Arizona, and far southern Arizona at that. So you might be wondering, well, gee, Wonderhussy, how could it be chilly in southern Arizona? Isn't that one of the hottest places on Earth? Well, yes, it is most of the year, but in the wintertime, little known fact, it actually snows down here. Or I guess I shouldn't say down here, because I'm actually up in elevation around almost 7,000 feet at a place called Chiricahua National Monument. That's right, Chiricahua. Chiricahua. I think. I guess it's a Spanish word, or maybe a Native American word, because before the arrival of the white man, shocker, there were a bunch of Native Americans living down here, the Chiricahua Apache tribe. Okay, you may have heard of the Apache. They were one of the most fearsome Indian tribes and one of the last to be conquered under the iron fist of the white man. Okay, remember Geronimo and Cochise? Well, they once roamed these bizarre rock formations way up here in the Chiricahua Mountains, which, incidentally, are what's known as a sky island. Okay, I talked about sky islands in a video I made up in the Spring Mountains outside Las Vegas. Basically, a sky island is a mountain range that's really high relative to the surrounding flat baking desert plain, which you can probably see off there in the distance behind me. Well, same kind of thing in Las Vegas. Mount Charleston rises above the valley floor to like almost 12,000 feet. Here in the Chiricahua Mountains, we're at almost 7,000 feet, way above that sweltering, blistering desert in the distance, which honestly doesn't sound so bad on a chilly day like today. This is a lot colder weather than I'm used to, but I got my puffer coat on. I even have a pair of gloves with me, and I'm prepared to make the most of my time at this astoundingly beautiful national monument. I mean, look at these otherworldly rock formations. Okay, I'm up here at a place called Massai Point. I guess it's named after some real bad-ass Apache dude named Massai. And just look at these crazy formations. I guess what happened was there was a volcanic explosion here many thousands of years ago, and the ash melted down to create volcanic tuff, and then erosion over the years, rain and winds kind of carved these bizarre shapes that are known as hoodoos. Hoodoos. You remind me of the babe. What babe? The babe with the power of hoodoo, you-do. Remember that from Labyrinth with David Bowie? Anyway, these things are called hoodoos, and I'm pretty sure it has absolutely nothing to do with David Bowie or the movie Labyrinth. That's just what they're called. Anyways, this would be an amazing place when it wasn't so freaking cold to hang out and drink a little mushroom tea. You know what I mean? I mean, if you sat up here at sunset, just as the shadows were starting to grow long and all these mysterious shapes started to emerge, you could probably see distinct personalities among each one of these hoodoos. You know, some might just say they look like rock pillars, but some might say they look like an army of silent ghosts, rock ghosts of the fiercely proud Apache warriors who once roamed this land. You know, like maybe this one here was Cochise, the legendary chief of the Apache. Anyway, there's all kinds of hiking trails you can take that lead you down in amongst these mysterious hoodoo formations. So even though it's frickin' freezing cold, and even though there's still patches of snow on the ground, well, I drove all the way out here. In fact, I'm almost down on the Mexican border. We're that far south. And if I came all this way, well, it seems silly to let a little thing like snow and 46-degree weather keep me from exploring this beautiful park. Okay, technically, Chiricahua isn't a national park, it's a national monument, though a bill was passed in 2023 to redesignate it as a park, and I'm not sure what happened. Either way, it's about 12,000 acres of spectacular country with 17 miles of hiking trails to choose from. And since the friend I was with had a bad knee, we decided to try an easy loop through Echo Canyon, which would take us down into the otherworldly rock formations so we could check them out up close. Wow, I mean, look at this hoodoo. How is this thing even still balanced like that after all these thousands of years? You know, you'd think that one big gust of wind would just knock this top part clean off. But here it is, still standing, just like all these other random formations are still standing. You know, these things kind of remind me of nature's rock cairns, okay? You know, rock cairns, those stacks of rock that you sometimes see out along a trail, marking a trail. And there's apparently a big backlash against them nowadays where people go, oh, don't stack rocks out in the wilderness because it's messing with nature's flow. It's a sign of man. Like, there's plenty of rock stacks already out here anyway. You know, what's the big friggin' deal? If it's good enough for God, it's good enough for Wonderhussy. I think I just came up with my new bumper sticker. Oh, wow, look at these. I mean, these formations in front of us, look how high they go up. And what's really interesting to me is there's like trees that grow on some of these things. Let me see if I can find one. Well, you can kind of see, like, I guess all it takes is a little tiny patch of dirt for some little shrub to plant a toe in, and then it takes off and grows out of the side of this rock formation. It's really interesting. And I guess, I mean, there must be like little chipmunks and rats and stuff who, well, no, I guess not, because how would they get to the tops of those things? The top of each one of those is like its own little individual island, only visited by birds. Boy, talk about sky islands. It almost feels like I'm hiking through a bonsai plant, okay? If you've ever seen a bonsai plant, those little miniature cypress trees or fir trees that they cultivate to be little teeny tiny trees on a bunch of rocks. You can display them on your desk or wherever. This topography reminds me of that. Like I'm a little tiny ant crawling around through a bonsai plant on the desk of some douchebag CEO. God, wouldn't that be the grand irony if that's what all of life was? It's not turtles upon turtles upon turtles. We're all living in a bonsai plant on the desk of Elon Musk. I hate to break it to you, but since we don't know any better, it sure is beautiful. Okay, it looks like we have arrived at the grottos. I guess that's the Echo Canyon grottos. And I don't know if it's anything like the grotto at the Playboy Mansion, but if it is, woo-wee, we are in for a treat. Actually, I think it's just called grottos because it's a bunch of kind of like, I guess, little cave type formations in amongst these giant, crazily balanced rocks. Or, oh, look, it's kind of like an alleyway going up between them. Wow, this is super cool. We're climbing through this. It almost feels like we're in like catacombs or something, like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But they're not man-made. These are all natural. Isn't that cool? I sort of feel like Lara Croft and Tomb Raider, Grotto Raider. That doesn't quite have the same cachet. Although I guess if you were raiding the grotto, at the Playboy Mansion, well, that'd be like Panty Raider. Okay, I'll stop profaning this beautiful place with my juvenile humor now. Oh my gosh, look how cool. You could just wander in amongst these formations all day. And I'm sure that's what the Chiricahua Apache did when they lived up in these mountains to escape the summer heat. They probably welcomed the shade that was found in these grottos, and that's where they spent a lot of time hanging out. And they probably also used these grottos to hide out once the white man started moving into this area and causing trouble for him. The Apache were notoriously fierce warriors, but after many violent skirmishes with the new settlers, their chief Cochise, who incidentally was such a badass that he refused to ever have his photograph taken, eventually signed a peace treaty, and the tribe was moved to a designated reservation down in the desert lowlands. But the Chiricahua were mountain people. They didn't want to live down in the desert. So a band of renegades, led by Geronimo, refused to go down that easy. They escaped the reservation and went back to their real home, here in these mountains, where they built a stronghold and managed to hide out until 1886, when the last of this proudly fierce tribe was finally forced to surrender and were shipped by train to a prison in Florida. But even then, the Apache spirit just wouldn't give up. Remember how I started this video at an overlook named after a badass warrior named Massai? Well, Massai wasn't about to be shipped to Florida. He and another warrior actually jumped off the train somewhere in Missouri and made their way all the way back to their homeland here in the Chiricahua Mountains. And all of this happened in the relatively recent past, just over 100 years ago. So maybe that's why, when you're hiking among these mysterious rock formations, you can almost feel the spirits of Cochise, Geronimo, Massai, and all the other Chiricahua Apache warriors who once roamed these trails. Okay, wow, this trail is taking us down, 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 in amongst these hoodoos. And again, I'd love to be here a little bit later in the day, if it wasn't so cold anyway, because I'm sure the shadows are even more pronounced towards sunset, and you would see all kinds of crazy shapes and figures and ghosts, figuratively speaking, coming out of the rocks all around you, and Lord knows what kind of conversations you could have with them. And actually, speaking of ghosts, one of the most interesting stories I read while I was researching this national monument was about this park ranger who worked here back in 1980, who went missing one day and no trace was ever found of him. Okay, it's kind of like one of those missing 911 stories. This dude had been a park ranger for quite some time, and he ended up, well, I think he was kind of exiled out here to Chiricahua because he kind of butted heads with authority. This was back, well, he started his career back in the 60s, and you know, there was a lot of counterculture opposition to authority back in those days. Well, he was one of those guys. He had a ponytail that I think might have even kind of been against Park Service regulations, and he had a mustache, and he was always getting in fights with his bosses, and he was even fired for a little while, but eventually he sued the Park Service and got his job back, and they kind of sent him out here to Chiricahua, almost like an exile type situation, because you really are in the middle of nowhere out here. I mean, there's no major towns anywhere nearby. You're pretty much on your own out here with whatever supplies you pack in. You know, you're not going into town and having any drinks with the local girls or anything like that. Anyway, this dude was exiled out here, but apparently he liked it out here until one day. In fact, today is actually the exact 45th anniversary of his disappearance. It was January 13th. I'm shooting this on January 13th, back in 1980. Okay, so on January 13th, 1980, this park ranger named Paul Fugate set out to do some routine trail maintenance and never came back. And so once it got dark, his roommate, I guess, kind of slash girlfriend, got concerned and They all went out looking for him, and they couldn't find footprints in the snow or anything. There was just no trace of this guy. And so if you watch Missing 911 about all these people who go mysteriously vanishing in national parks and national forests, well, you might think it was Bigfoot or aliens or the government. Or down here, you might think he ran into foul play. That's right, because we're only about 40 miles north of the Mexican border. There's always been smugglers and human traffickers in this area. And so at first, that was the theory, that Fugate had encountered some bad hombres doing something they didn't want to be seen doing, and so they whacked him. And in fact, I guess as they were investigating the case, they interviewed some guy in one of the surrounding communities who said he did see that park ranger's pickup truck with two dudes sitting in it and the guy, Fugate, in the middle, sitting kind of slumped over. And so for a long time, that was the theory, that some bad Mexican hombres got him and I guess killed him. But no trace was ever found of any of that, despite the best efforts of law enforcement. And this investigation went on for years and years. Oh wow, it looks like we just came into another kind of grotto type situation. I mean, again, I'm gonna have to zoom out, but just really surreal and otherworldly and beautiful how the light and shadow plays on these rocks and the different textures. Like, look up here. There's this crazy, real nubbly, I don't know if you'd call that a hoodoo or just a formation. I mean, it's like layer upon layer of rock that sort of split or fractured into these kind of like slabs. God, you can, even in this daylight, you can see shapes and faces in some of these rocks. Really cool and kind of spooky, especially if you were here later in the day. Well, maybe that's just me telling the story of this park ranger who went mysteriously disappearing. Anyway, as they were investigating this case, the years went by. In fact, the decades went by, and they never were able to really pin the crime on anybody. Meanwhile, there was a couple other theories. One being, remember how I said he had a roommate who reported him missing? Roommate / girlfriend. Well, he was actually married, but his wife lived back in Tucson, which is like over 3 hours from here. I guess they had kind of an open marriage where he was allowed to live out here at the national park and have his fun, as long as he didn't get emotionally attached to any of the women that he was fooling around with. And I guess his wife was well aware of this roommate / girlfriend that he had down here, this young woman named Bonnie. And come to find out, right at the time of his disappearance, she was pregnant. Okay, she was about 2 months pregnant. So one theory is, no, maybe he just disappeared on purpose because he didn't want to deal with a pregnant girlfriend and an angry wife. Oh wow, look at these little erosion holes in the side of this rock. Amazing. Anyway, back to my story. I guess adding to that theory was the fact that they found, I don't know, some paperwork at his wife's house. Like, she had written him a big check. She was about to give him a bunch of money. And so some think that he disappeared on purpose with her blessing, because then she could report him disappeared / dead, and she would get survivor benefits from the federal government. Okay, I guess they pay out pretty juicy survivor benefits if your spouse dies and they're the breadwinner and they work for the federal government, like the Park Service. So it took a while, because at first the Park Service didn't want to admit or declare him dead because they never found any remains. But I guess his wife fought it in court, and in the court of public opinion too. I mean, it didn't look good. It wasn't a good look for the Park Service to be denying the widow of this vanished park ranger her survival benefits, you know? Just not a good look for the federal government. And so eventually they caved, and they did pay her out a decent chunk of change, but it wasn't like a ton. So the theory that he disappeared on purpose so that she could get rich and he could be free of his pregnant girlfriend, I guess it doesn't really make that much sense either. And then I guess late in the investigation, like around 2019, they did get a tip from some dude in prison that said he heard some guy bragging about having done the murder in Wisconsin, I guess. That's right, all the way over in Wisconsin, some dude at a bar was bragging about having killed a park ranger somewhere in the area of Cochise's grave. Well, meanwhile, Cochise, the great Apache chief, is buried down in this general area, but no one knows exactly where he's buried. They kept it a big secret. It was Native American guys, and I think there was one white man with him when they buried Cochise, and they all kept it a secret. To this day, I guess no one knows where Cochise's grave is. So how this dude would know that he killed a park ranger by Cochise's grave, I don't know. That doesn't really add up either. So I guess it's just another one of those mysteries that might never be solved. And I guess it's just one of many mysterious stories that happened in these mysterious mountains. I mean, there's no telling how many men went missing here and were never heard from again back in the days when the Apache roamed free. Well, unfortunately, my friend's knee started acting up, so we weren't able to complete the entire hike that I wanted to do. And I got just a tiny taste of what I could do in beautiful Chiricahua National Monument. So I will definitely be back, hopefully at a slightly warmer time of year, closer to sunset, and with my tea kettle in tow. If you know what I mean. This is definitely a landscape I'd like to get to know better, and a part of the country I'd like to get to know better. You know, despite the drug smugglers and despite the human trafficking, there's just something really wild and desolate about far southern Arizona that has me totally enchanted. So watch out, Cochise County. I'll be back.